Welcome to the class of 2020 GLE NC Seal of Biliteracy Results and Impact webinar. We are recording today's broadcast, so let's get started with all that we have to share with you. Today's agenda is coming up on the screen. My name is Anne-Marie Gunter. I'm the World Languages Consultant at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. And I'll pause for a moment here and let my colleagues who are presenting today as well introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. I'm Cynthia Floyd. I'm your state consultant for school counseling. Thank you for joining us.
And hi, this is Ivana Manthor Anderson, one of the ESL Title III consultants and DLI co-lead at DPI.
So we're here today not only to welcome you, but to share, of course, the Global Languages Endorsement, or GLE data, for the class of 2020. We're going to start with that data in particular. Then we're going to do an overview of all of our GLE data since we first began having the Seal of Biliteracy in 2015. We're also going to focus in on educating others about the GLE because our state Seal of Biliteracy, though relatively new still, does take some understanding to work well. And so that's one of the reasons why we've got so many panelists today, because we want to make sure you hear the perspectives of not just world languages with the Seal of Biliteracy, but also ESL and English in general, as well as the school counseling perspective on this particular diploma endorsement. And then we'll finish up with the information and links and some reminders and resources. One thing that I did was to add the Seal of Biliteracy website, which is at bit.ly/ncsealgle. That is also in the chat box from some of our other panelists here with me, so thank you for putting that in. You can always link out to that at any time, and a lot of the things we're going to be talking about are posted there, and plus many more details. So we've got a lot to share with you. As we get started, we want to make sure you know how to control your Webex event panel for the webinar. Know that Webex is accessible online and via app, so your display probably looks like the screenshots on the left there on the slide, but they may look a little different depending on what browser you chose to access today or what type of device you're on. Everyone is on mute so that our recording doesn't have any background noise. And then, of course, you have your control panel on your side display. It's probably displaying my initials right now because I'm the one presenting and talking, and that'll change, obviously, with some of the other panelists when they come on. Also know that on your control panel, you'll have the polling questions that appear periodically. We have several polling questions for you today. And the Q&A or the chat box is always available, too, on your control panel. And today, we've decided to link up the chat box, and would encourage you to put anything you have in the chat box to all of us as panelists, or to have it go out to everyone, because we're going to do some activities and things that you might want to share your information that you're typing into the chat box. So keep that in mind. Also, in your control panel, you have buttons at the bottom of your screen, and they're usually in the center, or they may be on the right side, depending on, again, which browser or device you decide to use today. But they allow you to access the webinar and control different things. Probably the most important ones are the ones that indicate the chat feature, so you can get to that, as well as the one that is red with a little X through it. That's what you'll hit when you're ready to leave, but if you accidentally hit it, you can come back in with your same connection link, so don't worry about that. But that's how the control panel works. So let's give that control panel some work. We're going to do our first polling question. Why did you join the broadcast today? As any teacher knows, you want to find out what's motivating students to learn, or your learners to be there. So I want you to check all that apply using that poll feature in your control panel. Did you want to access the latest information about the GLE, our state Seal of Biliteracy? Did you want to earn a contact hour for licensure renewal? Do you want to gather information to share with someone, your department, your team, your school or district? Did you want to learn about this diploma endorsement and our results so far? Or did you need to ask a question about the GLE policy, implementation, impact, or something like that? I'll go ahead and open that first question, and you'll be able to respond. You can check all that apply to you for today. Looks like almost everyone has filled out the poll question. Remember, one of the things with our Webex system is that attendance reports are based on your interactivity during the webinar. So be sure to answer all the poll questions. All right, we've got about 5 seconds and then we'll time out and close our poll and share the results with you. All right, let's take a look. In your control panel, you should now see the results. And as you can see, there are all kinds of reasons people are here today. One of the most prominent ones is to access the latest information about the GLE. Like I said, we have all of the brand new information for the class of 2020 to share with you about that. We also have people here just to learn more about this diploma endorsement. It is one of 5 diploma endorsements that the state of North Carolina has, and our results with it so far. Also, some of you are here to earn that contact hour for licensure renewal. That'll come to you afterwards in an email as an attached certificate. And the same number are here to gather information to share with your department, team, school, or district. And that's good too, because we will post all of these materials, these slides, links, and a recording of this broadcast on the World Language Webinar Series page, as well as the GLE webpage that we sent you the link for, and other places you can access this information to share. Also, a couple of you who said you're here that you need to ask a question about the policy, the implementation, the impact, or something like that. Please do ask that question. If we see your question, like if you put it in the chat box, and it's one we're going to answer as we go, we'll answer that way. If it's something more individual, we'll answer behind the scenes. And if it's something that would be good for everyone to know, and maybe we didn't think about including it, we will definitely put it in there so everyone gets the answer. All right. Well, thank you for letting us know why you decided to join the broadcast today. So here's a little quiz I have for you. And if you're listening carefully, of course, you already know I gave you some of the answers. But the question is, what are the facts about the Global Languages Endorsement, the GLE, North Carolina's Seal of Biliteracy? And so I'll open this poll quickly so you can check all that apply as facts for this particular question. There you go. We have 15 seconds left to go on our poll. All right. I'm going to show you the poll results. And the right answer is every answer. These are all facts about our Global Languages Endorsement. It has been available since the class of 2015. It is one of 5 diploma endorsements in North Carolina. North Carolina was one of the first 10 states with a Seal of Biliteracy, though now over 40 states have a Seal of Biliteracy. It does require proficiency in English and a world language, and the majority of our districts and charter schools in North Carolina have GLE earners each year in their graduating classes. All right, thank you for sharing that, and now we'll go on. So let's go over the basics. If you're on the Seal of Biliteracy page, you know that this is the new brochure, and you can actually click on it on that page and download a copy for yourself. This is an updated brochure, and I want to thank Ivana Manthrower-Anderson, who's on the line today. She is the visual mastermind behind our new brochure and really updating it from what we had initially. As we said, our Global Languages Endorsement, our Seal of Biliteracy, was approved and available beginning with the class of 2015. It is one of 5 high school diploma endorsements that a student can earn as a graduating senior, and it's outlined in State Board of Education or SBE policy grad-007. Its purpose is to provide a way for students to show their multiliteracy in English and at least one world language. It is the Seal of Biliteracy, so bi is English and one world language. Although please note, students can add other world languages for which they qualify to their Seal of Biliteracy. And that's important because this endorsement is automatically added to the student's transcript with the particular world language and its proficiency level, which we're going to take a closer look at a little later on. So here we are, the big reveal, our GLE data for the class of 2020. We had 6,244 graduating students earning the Global Languages Endorsement, our state seal of biliteracy. So imagine that for a moment. There were a lot of challenges for our class of 2020 last spring, but despite all those challenges, over 6,200 of them earned their seal of biliteracy, and that's on their transcripts and went with them as they went on to various campuses, the world of work, and so forth. 6% of our graduating class of 2020 earned this recognition. So again, 6% of all students. So if you think about your graduation classes, 6 out of every 100 students that walked across your stage, whether they did it virtually or face-to-face, was earning the seal of biliteracy. Also, the seal of biliteracy was earned in students in 75% of our districts. That's 86 out of 115 districts that had graduates with GLEs. And 53% of our charter schools, or 37 out of 70 with graduating classes, also had students who were earning the GLE. We have to be careful with those numbers. We have, of course, many more charter schools than just 70, but 70 is the total number of charter schools that actually have a high school that had a grade 12 for the class of 2020. So there you are, a majority of our districts and charter schools report GLE earners. Now, one thing to note is these numbers are slight decreases compared to the class of 2019, and we'll look at that more closely here in a bit. But that is likely, of course, due to the challenges of the pandemic. That is what it is for the class of 2020. And we just want to make sure that going forward, we educate people as much as possible about completing the requirements, both the English and the world language requirements for the GLE, so that as many students as possible earn it. Let's take a look at this data and find out what we know. So each year, the data we receive from PowerSchool, because the GLE is automated in PowerSchool, has contained more and more details and helped us out more and more to understand how students are earning it. For example, most of you probably know there are 3 different options students have for completing the world language requirement. And all 3 of those are used to earn the GLE. The majority of students, 93% obviously, do the course completion route. And this is where they're completing a level 4 course or higher, so level 4, level 5, maybe an AP course, an IB course, whatever it is. And have an unweighted GPA of 2.5 or higher in their courses. So 93% do that route. 7% are using the credit by demonstrated mastery or CDM process. And that's where they complete courses and earn credit for courses, as you know, with the CDM process. But if they earn credit for a course that's a level 4 or higher, just like with the course completion, that qualifies them on the world language requirement for their GLE. So 7% of our students this year use that option. And a little less than 1% used an external exam. So that's kind of how the world language options broke down. It's sort of interesting to think about. I do see a question in the question box about whether students should take the external testing route or something like that. It kind of depends on the student. And I will tell you that we have students, this person's asking about English language learner, but we have heritage students, for example, who are working on their GLE, the world language requirement for the GLE, by taking courses in their home or first language. We also have students, particularly in less commonly taught languages or languages not currently taught in K-12, for example, like Persian and Swahili, that do take the external assessment route because it's one of the only ones open to them. And so we try to make sure that on the external exam list, we have lots of options for our less commonly taught languages so that they have that. And so we'll look a little closer at that list and how that's used later on, but just know that that is one route, one option. So far, we don't have a lot of students taking that route, but that could change. The other thing that happened this year, you may remember in the fall, there was a back to school guidance memo about the CDM process. And one of the things we did was we said that if a student wanted to do the CDM process and use for the phase 1 of the CDM process, because there are 2 phases, but to use an external exam on the GLE list of approved exams that are, of course, proficiency based and aligned to our state standards for world languages, they could use that for phase 1, and then they could show their proficiency level and then match that with the CDM course they were completing for credit. And so we think that some of the CDM increases we're seeing this year might be from that option. We'll take a little closer look at that external exam option versus the course completion later on. So I'm cognizant of some of the questions that are being asked in the chat, and we'll deal with those a little later on.
So Anne-Marie, this is Ivana. I'm just going to jump in there. Neither Cynthia nor I are seeing these questions that you're seeing. And part of my job is to help with the chats behind the scenes. So I'm not sure if people are sending them just to the presenter, but you might want to send them to everyone so that we can all be following along.
And that is a good point. We have tried to adjust the settings so that when you send something in the chat box, you can send it to everyone so everyone can see it, or you can send it to all panelists, and that might be helpful too. All right, let's continue on with our GLE data for the class of 2020. Every year, we know the GLE has been earned in over 10 languages. And by the way, when we say that here's the list of languages, that means whatever languages graduating seniors qualified for is on the list. So when we have people say, well, why isn't the language I'm thinking of on the list? The answer is because so far, no graduating senior has qualified with that language, but that could happen this year. So here's the list coming up on the screen of the GLE world languages for the class of 2020. Now, one thing that we wanted to add here is an asterisk to the ones that were earned according to data via course completion and earned by other students using the CDM process. Notice that 6 of our languages out of the list we have. And one thing that was interesting to us is that obviously students are probably using the CDM process for languages that they already have proficiency in. So maybe they've been in, let's say, a K-8 program of some kind. Maybe they've lived abroad, like with some of our military families, or maybe they're a heritage or native speaker of that language. And so you see some of those languages like Chinese, French, and German, as well as Latin, Russian, and Spanish. We are continuing to do some investigation into the data as well to dig a little bit deeper into the CDM course completion and the course completion route to kind of see if there are some other less commonly taught languages that might be coming up through there. So right now that's our list. And as I said, there are over 10 languages every year that students are earning the GLE in. So that brings us to our next question. Which data about the GLE, our Seal of Biliteracy, surprised you the most? And this time you only get to pick one. What surprised you the most? Was it the number of graduates earning the GLE, the number of districts and charters with earners, the options used to meet the world language requirement, the list of GLE languages for the class of 2020? Or do you just want to say, I don't know, I can't pick one, there are several here. So I'll go ahead and open that question. Remember, you can only pick one instead of choose all that apply. So what was the most surprising to you? All right, get your choices in. You have 20 seconds left on the poll. All right. Thank you for doing that. I'm going to go ahead and share those results so that you can see them too. According to our results, the most surprising thing was that over 6,200 graduates earned the GLE in the class of 2020. So that's something interesting to think about, and we'll actually look at that in comparison to other graduating years on a slide coming up. There were also people surprised by the fact that what options were used to meet that world language requirement. Remember, there are 3 options. They were surprised by the list of the GLE languages for the class of 2020, as well as the number of districts and charters with GLE earners. And there were a couple people too who said, I can't pick just one. Sorry, there were several things that I thought were the most interesting or most surprising. All right, thank you for sharing that. We'll go ahead and move forward. Let's talk about where our data is for the GLE overall since it started in 2015. And as we discuss the GLE over time, I want you to choose one of these questions coming up to really think about as we look at this data and talk about what it means or what it could mean to you locally for your programs and teachers and students. First of all, think about the question, how are my students represented in this data that we're going to look at? Or consider, where is my district or charter school in this data? Or consider, which data is most important for me to research for my district or charter school? So maybe you want to dig down deeper into your district or charter school data to think about the number of GLEs that are being earned, the list of languages, or the changes from year to year. Because we've got a lot of data now, literally 6 years, 6 graduating classes. So let's take a look. Some of you have seen this chart before. It is the one that is posted on the page 2. And we've got it set up with the different colors for a very specific reason. First of all, the years in yellow, or with the yellowish background, 2015 through 2017, are the years in which we had the GLE, but it was not automated in PowerSchool, which meant that to get our statewide data, each school within each district had to enter that manually. We know we had students who were earning quite a bit, quite a number of GLEs, but we didn't always know how many because that data wasn't always entered manually. So we're going to look at the total number of GLEs, the percent of graduates statewide with GLEs, and then by graduates from high schools and districts and charter schools. So for those first 3 years, when it was not automated, you can see how many students we had each year, what percentage of the graduating class that usually was amounted to, and then how many of our districts and charter schools were reporting GLE earners when they had to manually enter their data. We knew that there were more students than that earning GLEs, but once it was automated with the class of 2018 and going forward, we really started to see some improvements in that and a more realistic picture of how many students were earning GLEs. I'm going to unveil that. That's in the green right now. And so you can see now we jumped up to a lot more students earning the GLE, a greater percentage of our graduating class, and a larger percentage of our districts and charter schools. And part of our district and charter school data, of course, is not only just this was automated, so the PowerSchool system automatically checks for people who have qualified for the GLE, both with world languages and with English, of course, for both sets of requirements. But it also reflects the fact that some districts offer quite a long sequence of world languages, and some are more limited in what they offer with their local sequence. So that is what it is, but it's something for us to consider when we think about students meeting the requirements for the GLE on both the world languages and English side. For 2020, here is our data, and so you can see that. You've seen it already, but you may be interested to know about what percentage of our districts, 75%, and what percentage of our charter schools had GLE earners. And so you see the note at the bottom as well about that calculation for the 2019-2020 school year. I do see a question about how do we know if our school or district is counted in the data? And in fact, that's a good lead into one of the activities that's coming up. So this is our overview of the data from 2015 to 2020. There's a lot we could say about that, but let's think about that in relation to those 3 questions I asked you to consider. How are my students represented in the data? Where is my district or charter school in this data? And what of this data might I want to research more for my district or charter school? Because at the state level, we only see the state level data. So for example, if you asked us, which of my high schools had the most GLE earners, we can't tell you that. But you can tell that because you can go into your system locally and find that information out. So let's do that. Let's drill down into our data. And what I want you to do is go to our Seal of Biliteracy website, and we put that link in the chat box several times, but we will put it in again just so that you can access it. There you see, bit.ly/NC-SEAL-GLE. So we want you to go to that Seal of Biliteracy page, and we're going to have you click on the information for the charter schools and districts, because we actually publish the data every year for how many graduates from each charter school and from each district have earned a GLE. And we set it up so that you can see which languages it's been earned in. So what I want you to do when we go over to this page is pull one of those spreadsheets, open it up, and write down your data from 2015 through 2020 to answer those next few questions. I'm going to click on the bit.ly link like you can do in the chat box, and we're going to go right out to the web page for the Seal of Biliteracy. I'm going to scroll down. You can see a lot of things that we've already talked about or are going to talk about. We're going to scroll down to the data part, and you can see here that we just have the charter school link and the district link. I click on the district, it brings up a set of a Google spreadsheet that has the districts alphabetized, and the charter school sheet looks just the same, by the way. And you can see that for each class of graduating seniors that were eligible for the GLE, how many students there were from that graduating class, and cumulatively, which world languages have been identified from each of those districts. So that is cumulative, so it's not necessarily that you have students earning them in every single one of those languages every year, but over time, that's what we're seeing in the data. So what I want you to do is dig down into that, go over to that page, pull your district or charter schools information and write that data down for 2015 through 2020. We'll give you just a minute to do that, and then we'll continue on with our questions. All right, so I hope you've had time to jot down your data. I see a note about the audio, so I hope the audio has come back on. We just did pause for a moment for you to do that, because it's important for you to have your data in front of you when we do these next few questions. I also think it's important for us to always think about, what does our data tell us about our programs? We do live in a data-driven society, as you know, and the GLE data is just one set of data, but it's a powerful one with world languages and also with languages in general. So you've taken a look at your data for your district or charter school, so you can tell if your school or district has reported their data, if they were reporting it, for example, when it had to be reported manually, or if it's been reported now that it's automated in PowerSchool. Sometimes there are some glitches, locally speaking, when data is reported. As you know, with any data system of reporting, we're only as good as what gets reported and what gets reported on time. So there are times when people have looked at their data and said, oh, maybe not all my high schools got their data in on time, and that could be, but we have published what we were given to publish at the statewide level. So what was your reaction to viewing your district's or charter school's GLE data? And you can choose again all that apply. Is it mostly what you expected to see? Were there some surprises in there? Are you going to explore further to see how your organization compares to others? Is there information you need to share soon from this data? Or do you want to say it's only Tuesday? Give me time to think about it. So what I will do is I will run our poll, and you can tell us what your reaction to viewing your district's or charter school's GLE data was. All right, we've got about 15 seconds. Share your reaction. All right, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share those poll results with you. And it looks like there was a mix. A lot of people said there were some surprises for you in that data. So I want you to think about those surprises and what they tell you, good and bad or neutral, about the GLE earners in your district or charter school. Also, some people said they're going to explore further to see how their organization compares to others. And that's always a good thing to do because we can only offer you the statewide data, but you can dig deeper into your local data and really think about what you're seeing with your GLE earners and what that tells you about your programs and offerings and access to those offerings that your students have. Several people said, too, that there's information they need to share soon from this data. Maybe they're thinking about passing that along to someone, as well as the people who said this is mostly what they expected to see in the data. And there's also a couple of folks who said it's only Tuesday, they're going to think about this for a while, and that's fine too. It's always good to think about your data for a bit. So let's think about this. I asked you to think about those 3 questions, and so now I want you to pick just one of the 3 questions and type your answer to that question into the chat box, starting with the letter for the question. So let me show you those questions again so you can share those in the chat box. So as you review that GLE data over time for your district or charter school, how are your students representing this data? If you're going to answer that question, start your answer with an S and then follow it with whatever it is. So how are your students representing that data? If you're going to answer the question, where is my high school or program in this data? I pick P for program to start your answer. So type that first in the chat box and then answer. Or if you're going to do some more research for district charter schools, start your answer with an R. And so some examples might be, for example, S for student question. Maybe only a small number of our eligible seniors are represented, and that's something to think about. Or maybe for research, you want to research why your numbers are so low if you think they should be higher. So take a moment, put those into the chat box, if you can, to all attendees, or at least to all panelists, so that we can all see your responses. We'll go ahead and pause for a moment while you do that activity. All right, there are already answers coming in, so I'm going to go over a few of them to share what other folks are thinking. We have several of you thinking that you want to really focus in on your students. How many of your students are representing that data? Several teachers who have commented that they want to go locally and get the data maybe from their school counselor, or others who would have the local data from Power School about how many students from each high school in their district or their charter school is offering or is having earners of the GLE and what that looks like. Some people want to do that because they think that their students are actually underrepresented for some reason in this data, and that could be something to investigate and find out about. Some of them want to look at that because they think their school has done quite well with GLE earners, and maybe that's a point of pride or something they could sort of boast about, if you will, with their graduates and with their community. Also, we have some people who want to look at this from the perspective of their high school or program. Part of that is because maybe they have students across the schools in North Carolina. A number of our students take world language courses, let's say from the NC virtual offerings or other online offerings. And so it might be that that data is being reported back at their high school, but it's sometimes hard to see then how that's happening across the state. Some people, again, want to look at that breakdown between programs. So they're really going to look at different high schools as well as different programs within a high school for that question. Some people also want to look at their data for their program because they have a high school that offers, let's say, 3 of the 5 languages listed for their district. And so they want to kind of see how that's looking across the way. I would say the most prominent answer we have here is for the research question. Which data is important for you to research, because people want to dig deeper into this. We have someone who wants to talk about the schools recognizing GLE earners at senior awards day and or graduation, aside from the transcript and diploma. And that's something we'll talk about a little bit later too. We have someone who wants to research those numbers by school, especially looking at each school with their CDM numbers for earning this. People who want to look at the numbers in general because they think they're low and they kind of want to look into the causes of that. So they want to do a little research on that. Some people want to do research because they want more students to receive the GLE and they want to know how they can review their programs and increase the opportunities for students to complete the requirements for the GLE. All right, well, thank you so much for sharing that information. It sounds like you have a lot of use of research you want to do with your data that we post here statewide that you can dig more deeply into locally. All right, so let's move on. Now, one of the things that's important always about the GLE or any opportunity like this, like a diploma endorsement, is to educate others about it and how students earn it. And so I would ask you to think about for yourselves, do others, like administrators that you work with, or colleagues, or parents, or your local board members, or your school counselors, know the answers to these questions about the GLE? Do they know how a student earns the GLE, that there are English and world language requirements, and what students can do to meet those? Do they know how you make it possible in your district or charter school for students to earn the GLE? And do they celebrate the GLE achievements of students when they graduate? And how do they celebrate that? So let's take a look at some of the answers to these questions. Obviously, we have our requirements for English and world languages. In English language arts, specifically, students have to take the 4 required English classes for graduation and get a 2.5 unweighted GPA or higher on those to meet the English requirement. For world languages, I've told you that we have 3 different options or ways that students can meet the world language requirement, but they always have to show that they have intermediate, low, or above proficiency based on our state standards. And then there's an additional requirement for English learners, and I'll let my colleague talk a little bit about that here for a moment in regards to English learners and ESL programs.
Sure. So right now, the way that, can you guys hear me okay? Is my volume up loud enough?
Yeah, you're good.
Great, thank you. Right now, the way that the requirements are written, if a student is currently designated as an English learner, then they fulfill the world languages requirements, as Anne-Marie just explained. They also fulfill the English language arts requirements, as just explained. And in addition to that, they are required to reach developing, which is level 3, on each of the 4 domains of the WIDA test: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So in the current requirements, our English learners have an additional requirement to fulfill in order to show that they have met the English learner or the English portion of the GLE. And so one of the exciting things that we have been working on, and this is just a teaser because we're not there yet, but one of the exciting things we have been working on is making some changes to the requirements to make it more equitable and to not pull English learners out as a separate group, but to have a variety of ways that the English requirements can be met, just as we have with the world languages. And I think that's all I'll say right now. Thanks, Anne-Marie.
And sure. And like she said, that work is underway. And what we'd like to see happen ultimately is that there are multiple options, not only just for world languages, like there are 3 options, but there might be, for example, 2 or 3 options to meet those English requirements that would incorporate our English learners, but not make them stand out in any way. It would also increase access to meet the English requirements for every student. And that's something important to consider as well. So let's look at our world language options, because there are a lot of questions about these and there's some educating that we need to do on these. As you saw, the most common option is completing 4 levels of the same language with an unweighted 2.5 GPA or higher for world languages. When students do it that way, the proficiency level they get on their transcript for that language is always intermediate low. That's how that one works. That's the most common option. Do understand too that it means a level 4 or higher course. We've had people get very concerned about how students have to take 4 courses. But the truth is, if a student gets placed in a higher course, let's say a level 3 course to begin their work in high school, once they take the level 3 and level 4, then they've met their requirement, assuming that their GPA for that coursework is done. So just because they're placed in level 3 doesn't mean they're counted out for levels 1 and 2. They're considered to have taken that because they were placed higher. And they may have been placed higher because they did the CDM process as well and got credit for levels 1 and 2 on their transcript. Another option is to take this external exam. And we do have an Ncdpi approved external assessment list for the GLE. It is, as we said, now sometimes used with the CDM phase 1 process as well. It is a local decision if you want to do this external exam option. And all the languages and all the tests that are on that list are, of course, proficiency based to match our state standards. And again, it is a local decision which of those to use. We try to put the proficiency-based exams on there so that there's a good variety to choose from in as many languages as possible, because we have a lot of home and heritage languages across North Carolina, and we want to meet students' needs who are earning the GLE in those languages. One thing to note about our external exam option here is that when students take an exam that is on that list, that is proficiency-based, depending on their score, they may meet the minimum requirement, which is intermediate low proficiency, or if they do really well, which a lot of our native speakers, our first language speakers of a language do, they might test at a level that is comparable to intermediate mid, intermediate high, or even advanced low or advanced mid proficiency level. And if that's the case, they'll actually get that proficiency level on their transcript with that particular language, so that you can earn the GLE in a higher level of proficiency than just the minimum of intermediate low. And finally, you can also use the credit by demonstrated mastery policy to establish intermediate low proficiency. Once again, this is something that you have to have a minimum intermediate low. So if you did, for example, the CDM process for, let's say, your level 4 course, that would meet your world language requirement for the GLE. But you might finish at a higher level. And because the CDM process involves testing, and usually one of the external exams that we have listed for the GLE, we have students earning the GLE at a higher proficiency level through that credit by demonstrated mastery process too. We do have, by the way, a list of all of our courses and what proficiency level they would be for CDM on the GLE page. And so that's available for everyone to use. Even if you're wanting to do a lower level test for CDM, like a level 1 or level 2 or level 3 course, those are all in there, as well as the level 4 courses and higher that have at least minimum proficiency of intermediate low. So those are our 3 options, and those are explained in much greater detail with those support documents on the GLE webpage. So let's talk about for a minute what benefits North Carolina has seen with the GLE, our state seal of biliteracy. First of all, we've seen students taking longer sequences of language to earn the GLE. I know most of you are aware that the UNC minimum admissions requirement is 2 courses in a language. And once we had the GLE, we started to see an increase in the number of students who were taking a level 3, a level 4 course, and even higher in order to complete their GLE requirements for a world language by taking upper level courses. Also, with the Seal of Biliteracy, we've seen a recognition of home and heritage languages, even those not yet taught in K-12. I mentioned Persian and Swahili a little bit ago, and the reason I did that was because we have seen students earn GLEs with those languages, but we know we don't have any K-12 programs in Persian and Swahili, so it must have been a home or heritage speaker. Also, given what we saw with the CDM work earlier for the class of 2020, it's becoming obvious to us that some of our home and heritage language speakers or signers are using things like the CDM process or the external assessment process to complete their GLE world language requirement in their home language. And there's a lot of interest, by the way, in how having the GLE information on transcripts would impact things like college admissions. For example, making students more competitive for certain programs on a particular campus because you've got way beyond the minimum admissions requirement. And so it might make you more competitive, as well as with jobs and careers. And so we need to consider how that's impacting our students going forward. We've also seen as a benefit an increase in students pursuing post-secondary certifications, minors, and the like in their GLE languages. So one of the concerns I know we had early on from our post-secondary colleagues was that students would sort of stop once they had the GLE because they would have met and exceeded, let's say, admissions requirements. But in fact, what we're seeing students do is to say, well, with all that they've got with their GLE, and they might have other things that go with this, might be given credit by their university, some of them are deciding to pursue certificates in that language, to do an actual minor in that language, to accompany whatever other major or work that they're doing on that campus. And so we're seeing an increase in students adding languages to their post-secondary plans and work. We're going to talk about the benefits. We also have to talk about the challenges. And so North Carolina has seen some challenges with the GLE. First of all, we've already covered one of the challenges, which was reporting issues. Before the GLE was automated in PowerSchool, we knew more students were earning it than were actually being reported, but it wasn't being entered into the statewide system, so we couldn't see the students in the data. We've resolved that issue now, which is good. One thing we still need to work on, though, is sometimes we don't have consistent reporting. So as I mentioned before, sometimes you don't have every single high school reporting within the PowerSchool system. So that's something we can work on locally. We also had concerns about equity and access. You heard Ivana talk earlier about how the English learner requirement for the English requirement seems now a bit strange to us, and we're trying to change that. So we make it more equitable and accessible to all students to meet their English requirements for the GLE. And we do have a lack of knowledge about the GLE and the Seal of Biliteracy with school counselors and teachers and parents, because this usually, and it is something that's still relatively new for us, even though we've had it for a little while now. And it's something that is sometimes brand new to school counselors and to teachers and parents who haven't necessarily heard about it, but can be educated about it. And it's come out actually in our national data about seals of biliteracy across the country that this lack of knowledge, particularly for school counselors, is concerning, because school counselors are often the people who are scheduling students into classes to complete their requirements for a seal of biliteracy. We've decided to tackle that one, by the way, head on. I'm going to let my colleague Cynthia talk to you about that.
Absolutely. So as Anne-Marie mentioned, we've decided to tackle that head on and put some supports out there for school counselors and other interested educators. And we've created a Canvas course on counseling, advising, and scheduling tips, or CAST, for world languages. This is a self-paced Canvas course worth 0.5 or half CEU if you complete the course. And it really promotes more understanding of world language options for students K-12. Course codes, and we all know how challenging course codes can be. It explains the course codes in depth, scheduling best practices, related career and college relevance, etc. So it's designed to help school counselors, other interested school personnel have a more pervasive knowledge in supporting students into the best world language options for them. Currently, it is under final review and edits and is expected to be released within the next couple of weeks. And we will let you know via our various listservs when it will be available. So we've put a lot of work in this and really listened to school counselors on what it is that they need to know more about with world languages, and tried to embed it into this course to support school counselors and other school personnel in helping students get on the right track with their world language courses and with GLE.
Great, thank you. And that is something that we've been trying to make available. As Cynthia said, it will be available starting in April, which is just a few days away. So look for that by about mid-April or so to be released. We have a couple of questions we're going to address. One person shared that their world language coordinator has done a fantastic job spreading the word about the GLE among teachers, counselors, and administrators, and that's great to hear. We hope that this self-paced Canvas course for our school counselors and others will help that even more. We also have a question about, can the Seal of Biliteracy earned in North Carolina be recognized when students apply for colleges outside North Carolina? The answer is absolutely yes, because it goes right on their transcript. And so they can include that in their work with whatever campus they are wanting to attend. It goes right in with their admissions work because it's on their transcript. All right, let's continue on. Another thing we want to share with you that will help in educating others is that the Seal of Biliteracy, our GLE, is being added to the school report cards on the Career Ready tab with the other high school diploma endorsements for each high school in the state. You see on the screen a little screenshot of what that looks like on a high school report card. I think most of you are familiar with the school report card system and the announcement each year of when those come out and get shared with the public. This is something that's a very important metric for many of our schools, elementary, middle school, and high school. And so on the high school ones, there's a section on the Career Ready tab that talks about high school diploma endorsement. So on the left-hand side, you see a screenshot of that chart, and you see the other 4 diploma endorsements. It has how many graduating seniors they had earning those endorsements from this particular high school. FYI, this is a high school in Wake County Public Schools. I had to pick one, so that's the one I got the screenshot from. And on the right-hand side, you see the same information for that same school, but now in table format, because you can toggle back and forth between a chart and a table on the school report card for this. So look for that to be added. That will, of course, be there for our class of 2020. We have asked that the information be added retroactively to school report cards, so you can kind of back check, if you will, your district numbers and where each high school, what numbers each high school is contributing to that overall district number. And so that'll be a little easier for you to check locally. We have asked for them to add that going back as far as the class of 2018, because that's when it was automated in PowerSchool, and so that data is readily available to the system that works with the school report cards to publish each year.
Anne Marie, we received a question about the Canvas course in the chat right when you got to this slide. I'm wanting to know, will they be getting information on the Canvas course via email? We will be sharing this out. Like if you're on the school counseling listserv, it will go out on the school counseling listserv. Anne Marie also has a World Languages listserv. Did you want to add anything to that, Anne Marie?
Well, definitely we'll share on the listservs and newsletters, because this will be a new learning opportunity that will be available first to school counselors, but also to any other educators who would benefit from learning more about world languages, because it covers sort of the whole spectrum of counseling, advising, and scheduling tips for world languages K-12. So they're going out on our listservs. And Ivana, how about the ESL listservs and some of those?
Absolutely. We'll be sharing it on the private ESL listserv as well as the Teachers of English Learners, because we want this word to be out and to be far and wide, because as some of you talked about in the research answer to the question, what can we do in order to make sure the word is out and people understand how to get the GLE and to realize that the GLE is North Carolina's Seal of Biliteracy.
And in case any of you are not on those listservs, I'm going to go out and copy the link to sign up for DPI Gov Delivery listservs. You can sign up for as many topics as you want. Keep in mind, they're all separate listservs. So in case anyone is not on those listservs, be sure to get signed up and we'll get that information to you.
So while we're thinking about that, and you're adding other questions that we appreciate because it helps us all learn more, we've got a question for you. So we want you to type your answer to the question in the chat box to share what ways that you do, can, or will publicize your GLE achievements and educate others about the GLE. So for example, ask yourself that question: how do we publicize the GLE achievements of students? Do you include that information at your graduation ceremony or in your program for your graduation so that students are recognized, let's say, with an asterisk or some kind of denotation? Maybe you do that in addition to having the actual physical seals on the diplomas. So what do you do that way? Do you include your GLE earners in an awards night, or let's say a senior showcase program, or whatever you have locally to recognize students for their achievements? Do you post that information as website banners or other kinds of postings online with details about maybe the students or the number of students or the languages where students are earning the GLE at your school or district? Do you have press releases for your local media outlets, maybe your local newspaper, TV, or radio stations where you talk about the GLE, our Seal of Biliteracy, and what that means to students when they're graduating? Or there might be other ways that work well in your local community. So add those in to our chat box. To what you do to publicize the GLE achievements of students, programs, and high schools.
And again, if you want all of us to be able to see your comment, be sure to select everyone for the to drop down.
Right. I see a lot of wonderful answers coming in. There's people who are saying they have graduation ceremony lanyards that the students wear so that everyone can see, usually by the color or design of a lanyard, how they're being recognized for their accomplishments. We have someone who said last year they put the seals on the diploma and made sure everyone knew about that. A couple people who are saying they do all of the things that are currently on the screen and even more. One person who likes the idea of a website banner. Yeah, those are always kind of nice because then when someone goes to your website, that usually pops up right away, as well as having them awards night. We did have a person ask about, when students earn the seal at a different level of proficiency. Let's say they take an external exam or something like that, and they really have gotten a higher score. Maybe they've got intermediate mid or intermediate high proficiency and exceeded that. Is there any way to tell that? Well, there's a couple ways. First of all, it's going on their transcript that way. So anyone who sees their transcript, their college admissions, and so on will see that. Also, you can do things locally to make sure that they're recognized for that and hold them up above the different groups of students earning the GLE at different levels. So that's always something you can do locally. A couple people said they'd add an extra lanyard for that, or maybe even an extra lanyard if a student had earned the GLE in multiple world languages, which is obviously possible. Students can add another world language by completing the requirements for an additional world language. And they can have different languages at proficiency levels, and they still earn their Seal of Biliteracy. All right, we'll keep those ideas coming. We will share your ideas from the chat as part of the archives of this broadcast. All right, that brings us to our reminders and resources. I see we're wrapping up right on time, so that's good. Be sure and sign up for Ncdpi listservs for the updates. You can sign up for a variety of things, as Cynthia added our sign up just earlier. But we have things like the World Language Instructors listserv for K-20 instructors, the World Language Education News, which is a general newsletter. We have a listserv for teachers of English learners and one for global education, just to name a few where information about our GLE goes out. And Cynthia has once again added that where you can subscribe to the DPI listservs in the chat box. So we encourage you to do that. Also, don't forget, as I said, the archives from this broadcast will be posted on our webinar series information page and the GLE page within the next week. It'll be a recording, our slides in 3 different formats for you, so that you can just download these slides as Google Slides, as PowerPoint slides, or even as PDFs, so you can share them out as you need to, and then any handouts or links. Also, if you participate in the live broadcast, of course, you're getting a certificate with the CEU. That'll come in the form of an email with an attached certificate. Look for that in about a week from today. And don't forget that with all professional development, our local education agencies or districts and charter schools usually have to approve professional development offerings. I just wanted a couple slides here to remind you where information is about the GLE. It is posted as part of our global education initiatives for the state on the DPI website. If you just follow that, the Global Education bit.ly link, and go to the Global Education Recognitions page, you can get information actually about the GLE as well as the Global Educator Digital Badge and the Global Ready School and Global Ready District designations as well. And finally, all of our things will be posted on the GLE information and resources page that you see there that we've been referencing all the way through. So please take a look at that. We are wrapping up right on time. We thank you for joining us today. If you have an individual question, we will certainly cover that in a moment, and we will talk with you about that. But again, we thank you for joining us today. We hope you've learned something and maybe gotten some information that you can take back and research and celebrate your students who are earning the GLE.